Robb Stark stood at the carved window slit of his father's solar, the chill of an early northern dusk pressing through stone and shutter alike. Below, Winterfell's courtyard roiled with the clang of hammers and the hot roar of forges. Yet no noise reached him. All sound was lost beneath the single line of ink that had rewritten the shape of the world. Lord Eddard Stark, former Hand of the King, arrested for treason. The parchment quivered in Robb's grasp, though his fingers were steady. He had read the words thrice already, had traced each letter until they blurred, but still the message refused to accept its place among things that simply were. Behind him, Maester Luwin waited with owl-like patience, his chain collar dim in the twilight. Somewhere beyond, Catelyn Stark moved through corridors shorn of warmth, gathering strength the way other women gathered cloaks. Robb felt the echo of her pacing in his chest. "Send word to Galbart Glover," Robb said at last, voice low, deliberate. "Tell him the dire wolf has been provoked." Maester Luwin inclined his head. "And the bannermen, my lord?" "All of them," Robb answered. "Every lord who remembers the price of Stark blood." He did not watch the maester leave. Instead he looked south, through stone, through leagues of darkening forest, through the next mires and the trident's silted red, toward the capital city where towers of pale marble would soon be black with torch smoke. King's Landing. His father waited there in chains, or perhaps already bereft of them, explained away by the clean edge of an executioner's sword. A hinge creaked. Catelyn slipped into the room, gray eyes sharpened by long days on perilous roads. She carried herself with the hush of a prayer, but her words fell like iron. "The ravens fly," she said, closing the door behind her. "We have 3 days, 4 at most, before the bannermen gather." Robb turned. "My lady mother, I will ride at dawn." "You will ride," Catelyn allowed, "but not alone." She crossed to him, laying a hand on his forearm. "There is strength in the wolf pack, and your lords will demand to see the Stark who calls them. Let them look upon you and know whom they follow." He almost asked whether they would follow a boy of 16 winters. The question lived in the trembling of his shoulders, but he buried it beneath colder truths. His father had been called traitor, his sister's hostage, the crown now perched upon the brow of Robert Baratheon's whelp, a boy who brandished power as if it were a painted wooden sword. And somewhere beneath the red keep, a deeper shadow plotted: Queen, Lion, Regent, Mother. "Cersei, we ride as one," Robb said, "and we ride soon." 2 dawns later, the gods would stood silent witness as Winterfell emptied of its wolves. Snow fell in soft spirals, though summer lingered by the reckoning of almanacs and maesters. The direwolf banners of the north, grizzled gray on white, rippled above columns of steel-capped helms, each helm a promise carved in iron. Great John Umber rode at the vanguard, beard bristling with frost, bawling a laugh that could have cracked the heart tree. Galbart Glover and Tallheart men followed, revering south in martial procession. And at their center, astride a lean destrier the color of beaten pewter, rode Robb Stark. He wore no crown. A leather doublet, plain and tight-laced, set off the dark plaits of his hair. Gray wind padded beside him, paws crunching snow, amber eyes tasting every scent on the wind. When the gates groaned open, a gasp went up, half prayer, half dread, and Robb felt the castle's ancient stones trying to hold him back, as if the north itself feared what lay beyond the Wolfswood's final pine. Catelyn watched from the battlements until the last spearpoint vanished. Only then did she turn away, breath fogging, hands pressed flat to the merlins as though to steady a spinning world. Ned's voice whispered through her memory. 10 years, perhaps 20, until the boy becomes a man grown. Fate had granted them 10 weeks. Now a boy rode to war, and a mother stayed behind to pray that manhood would find him before swords did. Moat Cailin rose from the mist like 3 rotted teeth, its black stones slick with centuries of rain and the blood of forgotten kings. The causeway swam beneath ankle-deep brine, forcing Robb's host to slog single file while arrows hissed from unseen murder holes. The Ironborn held those towers, a ragged clutch flying the kraken of pike. With no love for Lannister or Stark alike, but rather a pirate's hunger for silver tolls. Robb's first true command came here. "When you meet a kraken," Great John Umber advised, "you do not parley, you harpoon." Robb studied the ruin's angles, imagining the placement of every crossbowman. "Harpoon's dull," he replied. "Fire burns." A day later, barrels of pitch floated beneath the southern tower's crumbling arch. At dusk they bloomed into pillars of light, and the iron-born garrison fled into the bog, blinded and half-boiled. The banners of House Stark flew over Moat Cailin by moonrise. Robb allowed his men wine that night and walked the parapets alone. Grey Wind joined him, muzzle flecked with the gore of a scavenged leviathan. Once a dire wolf tasted war meat, even carrion would do. Robb knelt, fingers threading the wolf's ruff. "Father always said the neck was key," he murmured. "One way in, one way out." Grey Wind's tail swept the stones. Robb took it for a scent. Caitlin arrived on the 5th day, riding hard with fresh riders from White Harbor. Her cloak dripped with salt and spray, for she had cut across the White Knife, then followed the marsh road south. Robb welcomed her in the tower's shadow, and in that embrace she felt the boy's bones giving way to something sterner. "You burn your bridges behind you," she whispered. "I burn for the north," he replied, kissing her brow. At Riverrun, grief thickened the air like river silt. Lord Hoster Tully lay dying, his wheezing breaths a tide that receded each night only to return weaker come dawn. Ravens had carried word of Ned Stark's capture to the River Lords. Ravens now carried word of Robb's march back to him. Edmure Tully, face raw from too little sleep and too many vows of vengeance, met them beneath the Argent Trout. When he saw Caitlin dismount, his shoulders broke from tension he'd not known he carried. "Sister," his voice cracked, "your news?" Still no trial date. She kept her grief hidden but not her fury. "They hold him to bait us, nothing more." Edmure's jaw flexed. "Then the fish shall devour the lion. We ride with you." Riverrun's towers spat banners into the wind. Tully red and blue, and the Riverlands answered the call. Many brought tales. Gregor Clegane's raids, towns left smoking. Small folk flayed for sheltering men who wore the sigil of a wolf. With each horror, Robb's host swelled, anger-sucking swords from scabbards the way marshland drinks the sea. Yet numbers alone could not breach the golden crowns of King's Landing. Whispers of wildfire stalks, of scorpions poised atop Maegor's holdfast, circled campfires like half-tamed ghosts. Robb convened council in the ruined Sept of Stony September, its Septon statues shattered in Robert's rebellion a generation gone. Caitlin, Edmure, Great John, Roose Bolton, and a pair of Blackwood ravens that perched high overhead. These were his generals now. "We dare not siege the city," Bolton rasped, pale eyes reflecting candle flame. 10,000 men starve faster than 500,000 rats. And rats breed. Robb countered with silent resolve. "I do not intend to starve them. I intend to shock them. If we ride hard, striking faster than ravens can fly, we may reach the King's Road in less than a month. King's Landing's walls are high, yet I wager they were not built to withstand northern fury delivered before dawn." Great John thumped a gauntlet against the table, splintering oak edges. "Well said, boy." Bolton's mouth twitched, a hint of something colder than a smile. "As you command, my lord." Before dawn, the banners of the wolf and the trout leapt forward. Swift as rumor, the host poured south along the King's Road, bypassing Clegane's smoldering path to strike deeper, younger wounds. In towns where the Lannister Crimson had trampled grain, Stark Silvergrey planted new seeds. Refugees following in cautious trickles, children marveling at the direwolf that trotted a king's pace ahead of cavalry. Each night, Robb wrote letters sealed with direwolf wax. To Ser Brynden the Blackfish, urging mastery of river crossings. To his brother Bran in Winterfell, urging strength of mind and leg. To his sisters, though no raven could breach the Red Keep's walls, to remind them of snow-soft memories. He kept those last scrolls unsealed, for where could they fly? The first clash came at Sow's Horn, a hamlet whose only virtue had been obscurity. Lannister outriders, some 200 under Ser Adam Marbrand, sighted Robb's van and wheeled to circle. burning fields to blind the northerners in smoke. Robb answered with silence, drawing his lines within a veil of ash. Only when Marbrand's horses coughed and shrank back did the dire wolves howl. Gray wind burst from the haze, spectral, jaws crimson. Behind him thundered the Umber cavalry, unshaven throats bellowing songs of skinning lions. Then came the mailed fists of the Glovers, each hammer strike a heartbeat. Fire met fog, blood met snow-cooled steel, and the field became a place where colors lost meaning, red or white, black or gold, all alike in the churned mud. It ended swift as it began. Marbrand lay pinned beneath his dying charger, eyes vacant with surprise. His banner bent at a snapped pole, silk soaked through like a drowned thing. Robb dismounted beside him, wiping sword edge on a shred of Lannister cloak. "Ride west," Robb told the lone surviving courier, a boy no older than Bran. "Tell Tywin Lannister his cruelties have earned him a winter he cannot imagine." Across the pale sweep of the god's eye, another story unfolded. In Harrenhal's melted halls, Lord Tywin Lannister listened to a trembling raven. The lion's emerald gaze narrowed. "He marches early," Tywin observed, voice low as rust. Ser Kevin leaned close. "Shall we cut him at the Blackwater?"
"No."
"We bleed him along the road. Stab and withdraw, make him doubt every shadow." Tywin's fingers drummed on black stone fused by dragonfire. "See to it, cousin. The boy will learn the price of haste." Yet for every ambush Tywin loosed, Robb answered with counters of his own. Bolton's flayed men scouted ahead with silent precision, flensing information rather than flesh. Though sometimes the line blurred. When outriders reported Lannister camps east of Maidenpool, Robb bypassed them entirely, striking south for Derry where hostages loyal to lions kept the gates. He extracted them at midnight, leaving gold cloaks trussed to their own gibbets. By the time dusk painted the crowns of the Kingswood, Robb's banners fluttered only 30 leagues north of King's Landing. Small folk along the wood road whispered of a northern prince with a wolf bigger than any horse, of river lords whose arrows sang like summer rain, of a host that moved like the rush of spring thaw. Inside the capital, panic rippled through markets and septs alike. New edicts forbade open talk of wolves. Bread prices doubled. Wildfire casks were rolled from cellars to battlements. Queen Cersei watched from the Tower of the Hand, her smile thin as spider silk. "Let him come," she said to Grand Maester Pycelle, "and break his teeth on our walls. Then the realm will see how the North howls when starved." But on the night the outer camps of Stokeworth saw the first glimmer of direwolf eyes, a different kind of fear took root, one not fed by walls or wildfire, a fear that walls themselves concede, that wildfire cannot cauterize, the fear that justice long delayed strides nearer with every hoofbeat. Robb Stark pitched his command tent on a rise overlooking the bay, its canvas staked where summer grass had never before felt northern frost. He kept no torches, letting darkness cloak his numbers. Only gray wind's pale shape moved the perimeter, a myth breathing. Within the tent, Catelyn unfurled a rough map onto the campaign table. "There are paths through the Kingswood," she murmured. "Paths the Undulls trod before there was a keep on Aegon's Hill." "We hold the terrain," Robb answered. "Yet terrain means little if the city resists a siege. We must find allies within." "Varys the Spider weaves his webs everywhere," Edmure muttered. Robb considered. "And webs can be burned. But a key. Catelyn, if I could open the river gate." She touched his wrist. "Patience, my son. The city is a knot of vipers. Uncoil them one at a time." Outside, in the hush where strategy slept, the young wolf closed his eyes and listened, not to the sea or the wind, but to the faintest creak of distant chains. In a black cell beneath the Red Keep, his father waited. Robb counted each heartbeat between them and vowed that the next would be shared under open sky. Morning broke with banners of molten gold. The sun rose behind Aegon's high hill, gilding the 7 towers. For a heartbeat, the godswood at the city's heart glimmered emerald. Then the light tilted, and smoke from 1,000 cookfires blurred the vision. King's Landing returned to its natural hue, sickly gray, reeking of tanneries and treason. Robb stood upon a low ridge, helm in crook of arm, cloak snapping. Before him unfurled the largest host assembled by a Stark since the long night. Spearmen of Carhold, axe-bearers of the dread fort, mounted archers from the mountain clans, ashamed no longer to fight under a southern sky. They waited for the order that would send them crashing against the richest city of the realm. But Robb spoke first to his captains, not of walls or rams, but of the why. "We do not ride for plunder," he said, his voice carrying far beyond the circle of steel. "We ride for a father, for two sisters, for truth twisted by cowards into crime. We ride so that the next time a lion thinks to devour a wolf's heart, he tastes iron instead." Helms pounded spear hafts. The sound rolled down the slope like storm surf. Catelyn watched, throat tight. He has grown, she thought, though the distance between girlhood and manhood had never looked more perilous. Every step forward narrowed the path behind. Down in King's Landing, word spread as all rumors do. By breathless whispers, by slops tossing scullions, by gold cloaks who overheard trembling stable boys. A northern host on the wood road, the wolf lord himself only a day's ride away. His mother at his side, her eyes full of storm water. And somewhere in the red keep's deepest holdfast, Eddard Stark lifted his head. He did not know the hour or the season. His beard had grown ragged as a crow's nest. Chains bound his wrists, yet the chill in the stone floor seemed warmer than hope had any right to be. He closed his eyes and pictured Winterfell's godswood, the heart tree's face weeping red sap into snow. But this time the wind through the leaves carried not the voice of the old gods, but his son's, steady, breaking, resolute. "I am coming, father. Hold fast." And in that cell, beneath rock older than crowns, Ned Stark allowed himself a single breath of belief. Night fell once more, and with it came the plans that would decide fates. Robb's commanders gathered in a ring of torchlight. Bolton unfolded a parchment's hush, revealing hidden watercourses beneath the city walls, forgotten drains choked with the refuse of kings. Great John favored the direct approach, a hammer strike at the gate of the gods, under cover of feigned assault upriver. Catelyn urged parley, or at least the appearance of one, to buy their spies inside the keep precious hours. Robb listened, weighing each angle as though hewn from the same northern granite that birthed him. Outside the tent, gray wind lifted his head to the sky. A thin cry answered, another dire wolf, far north among snowfields, or perhaps only the echo of wild promise. Either way, the sound knifed through the hush of a camp holding its breath. When Robb spoke, it was with the gravity of stone grinding on stone. "Tomorrow we test the lion's courage. At sunrise we send envoys under banner of truce, demanding the release of Lord Eddard Stark and his daughters. If they refuse..." His gaze passed over each face, pausing on the shadows behind their eyes. "Then the North will remind the realm what winter truly means." No cheer followed his words, only nods, measured as tides. They knew the cliff they stood upon, and knew the waves that waited below. Robb dismissed them one by one, until only Catelyn remained. She touched his cheek, as if reacquainting herself with the sun whose brow now carried crowns invisible yet heavy. "Sleep, Robb. How can I? Even wolves dream." He yielded then, if only for a moment, letting her hold him as she once had under an open sky filled with summer swallows. Tomorrow those skies might bloom with catapult fire. In his tent, Robb lay upon a field cot, the canvas above him breathing with night wind. Sleep came in fragments, a corridor of red pillars, the rasp of steel across a whetstone, Sansa singing a lullaby half-remembered, Arya's laughter skidding across pond ice. Then the image sharpened. His father, gaunt yet unbroken, stepping from shadow into dawn, chains falling away like hoarfrost. Robb woke with the taste of cold iron in his mouth and the sound of gray wind growling low at the distant horizon. Morning would soon paint the sky with sword-edge light, and the young wolf would march, not as a boy chasing rumor, but as a lord claiming debt. Far to the south of that pre-dawn hush, the bells of King's Landing rested in their towers, ropes curled like sleeping serpents. When next they rang, the city would not know whether they tolled for victory or for war's first dirge. Either way, Robb Stark was coming. A pale rim of light clung to the eastern horizon when the small column rode out from the northern camp. 7 riders only, one for each of the southern gods, Catelyn had said, though Robb suspected she chose the number because 7 figures would disappear more easily than 20 behind a banner of truce. Ser Wendell Manderly bore that banner, white silk kissed by pre-dawn wind. Beside him clopped 2 drummer boys with empty hands and tense eyes, their drums left behind lest a misheard cadence shatter the fragile silence. Maester Luwin rode third, scroll cases bumping against his hip. Then came Jory Castle's cousin Clay wielding nothing sharper than a quill, Ser Edmure Tully wearing polished mail but no helm, and at their center Catelyn herself cloaked in wolf grey trimmed with river blue. Robb watched them cross the open ground until the shadows of the Kingswood swallowed horse and rider alike. The air smelled of dew and sap and distant horse dung from a city still yawning awake. No horns blared from the walls. The city slept, dreaming lion dreams. Gray wind patted at Robb's knee, restless, tail flicking with each errant breeze that wandered from the battlements. Dawn stretched higher. Metal glimmered atop ramparts, helms turning, pikes setting, but no arrows fell. "They will not loose until the sun's full up," Great John muttered, stepping beside his lord. "The bastards want their quarry clear." "Let them wait," Robb answered. "If a lion rakes at shadows, he claws only stone." Hours passed in the hush before alarms. Robb walked the lines, checking lashings on siege towers not yet constructed, barrels of pitch not yet opened, catapults still half-carved from green pine. He spoke to sentries about useless things, hometown inns, the smell of fresh hay, how many miles a Riverlander horse could cover before its hooves split, and with every word he felt the weight of their trust settle heavier across his shoulders. Each jest he shared, each nod he offered, became another link in unseen armor. By midday he wore a full suit of it and could scarcely breathe. The city began to wake in earnest. Smoke lifted in tight dark columns, bakeries, smithies, tanners. The wind turned and carried the stench of tallow fires and sewage chutes over the camps. Roose Bolton's leech-pale gaze followed the spiral of fumes. "King's Landing will choke on its own refuse sooner than on our steel," he remarked. "Hold your patience, Lord Bolton," Robb said, though the words tasted of rust. "Choking is still dying, and dying still ends a life." Near midday the envoys reappeared, riding hard under escort of 10 gold cloaks. Their banner of truce hung limp now, soaked with sweat and city dew. When they reached the outworks Robb had raised, merely shallow ditches and timber stakes at present, Ser Wendell wheezed greetings between gasps. No arrows, true, but terror enough behind the silence of crossbows aimed from murder holes. Catelyn slid from her horse with stiff dignity. Dust streaked her skirts. The hem of her cloak bore a tear likely inflicted by some unseen nail along the city gatehouse. Robb met her halfway, heart thundering. "They refused?" he asked before she spoke. Her eyes answered. "They listened. That alone is a victory of sorts. Listening is less than freeing, yet more than mocking." She took his arm. The boy king was not present, only the queen, Pycelle, and Ser Boros of the Kingsguard. They insisted Lord Eddard remain safe, though their tongues shivered on the claim. They offered to try him at the Great September in Attendee, provided you withdraw 10 leagues. Robb's jaw tightened. 10 leagues? And if I refuse, then every man in your host is forsworn, and your father's guilt proclaimed before the realm. I need no crown's blessing to know my father's honor. Catelyn drew him aside, away from eager ears. "They fear us, Robb. I saw it plain as sunrise." Cersei's smile did not reach her eyes. "She seeks time, nothing more. Perhaps to smuggle Ned elsewhere, perhaps to summon reinforcements from the rock. If Tywin rides hard, he might break our rear while we batter walls. Let him try. We still hold Moat Cailin. The neck will bog his horses to bone. Unless he sails from Blackwater Bay." That thought stung like ice water dashed upon coals. Robb exhaled slow. "Then we do this quickly." He convened council beneath an awning of stitched hides. Maps lay pinned with daggers. Great John stood heavy-fisted over a cask. Bolton leaned so still a spider spun a thread from his pauldron to the table. Edmure drank water, soaked through with anxiety. Catelyn watched them, nursing her ragged pride. Cersei offers a trial in 10 days if we retreat, Robb announced. Yet we know the trial's verdict already. Great John spat. My lord, call me an impolite man, but I'll not march north again with tail wagging.
No te'l vagin, Rabesturd.
One way or another, the gates will open, but we choose how. Lord Bolton, your scouts say the mud gate suffers rot at the piling. Shipworms have hollowed half its timbers, Bolton confirmed, voice quiet. And the tide each night conceals men at its foot. A small force, silent, could affix chain grapnels, wrench the beams outward. Then the river will do the rest when it rises. How small a force? Robb asked. 3 dozen, perhaps 4. More would draw notice. Very well. Ser Brynden should lead them. Ser Brynden is patrolling the headwaters, Edmure interjected, almost apologetic. Robb nodded. Then I shall go. The tent stilled. Catelyn's breath hitched. Greatjon's eyebrows bristled like boar quills. My lord, Greatjon began. A commander does not swim the moat himself. Let me tear the rotten planks. But Bolton's lips curled the faintest degree. The city will look for umber banners. He turned to Robb. They will not look for a lordling in Night River muck. Robb met Greatjon's protest with a steady palm. Every man here would risk his life for my father. Mine is worth no more.
Igo kropka.
Preparations took daylight hostage. Black cloaks were sewn, arrowheads dulled to mute their clink. Bolton's quartermasters produced casks of river tar that would cling to rotten wood and hasten decay. At dusk, while the main camp sharpened axes and counted slingstones, Robb knelt in his command tent before a makeshift altar. The direwolf carved from weirwood root that always traveled with Stark armies. He pressed fingers to its snarling muzzle and whispered a pledge older than the Seven, that no chain would long hold a wolf of Winterfell. Gray wind watched near the door, yellow eyes reflecting candlelight. When Robb rose, the direwolf whined low, a mournful note that sent shivers along the tent wall. Not this time, Robb told him, tugging the wolf's ears. We need stealth more than teeth. He donned plain brigandine dyed muddy brown, smeared his face with ash, and cinched a dagger beneath each arm. Outside waited his chosen. Meage Mormont's eldest son Darren, 2 Karstark cousins thin as reed stalks, a tunneler from White Harbor whose name none could pronounce, and 20 more Riverlanders whose oaths to Ned Stark burned hot beyond simple fealty. They spoke little as they slipped into flat-keeled boats fashioned of birch and hide. The moon climbed, fat and white, blessing the river with a silver spine that threatened to betray every ripple. Catelyn rode with the rearguard to fetch twilight cover from the woodlands. She found Robb at the water's edge, 1 foot already in a skiff. You remember the whispers? She asked quietly. I remember everyone. He squeezed her hand. If the gate cracks, loose the main assault. If we fail, we will not speak of failure. Her lips brushed his brow, leaving warmth cold water could not steal. Go, bring him home. The boats pushed off without a splash.
Reeds rustlet.
The current gathered them, gentle at first, then insistent, tugging southward toward the glinting span of the river gate's arch and, beyond, the mud gate bulwark squatting between dock pilings. Rats scurried along quays. Gulls cried overhead. Somewhere along the east bank, a fisherman's lantern bobbed. When the first boats scraped mud under cover of a grain barge's hull, Robb slid into waist-deep blackwater, boots squelching in silt. Cold stabbed through greave and bone. He heard his men cross themselves or mutter snatches of prayer. The tide sucked at their knees, eager to drag them down. Moonlight revealed the gate's lower braces, huge crossbeams half-chewed by worms. Robb signaled. Tar pots passed hand to hand. Grapnels kissed wood with hushed thunks. They worked like midnight carpenters, wedging iron, wedging hope. Up above, a torch flared along the ramparts. Voices, boots, a gold cloak peered over the parapet. pissing wine-thin across the river. He never glanced down. Still, hearts hammered until the torch winked away. Bolts set, ropes wound taut, and Robb nodded. 3 men braced feet against pilings while 6 heaved. Rope fibers creaked, worms popped like knuckles. The first beam sagged, water burbling through new cracks. Another pull. This time the beam groaned a death rattle and tore free in a cascade of sludge-soaked splinters large as severed limbs. River water roared in, swirling dark and hungry. Back! Robb hissed, but the river dragged anyway, surging under the gatehouse. They tumbled, scrambling, clutching rope ends that snapped fingers raw. A torrent burst past, carrying the rotten gate into the city harbor like a funeral bier. Alarms erupted. From above, horns shrilled, metal clashed. Candles flurried to life along walks, painting shadows across stonemason's wharf. Avast, the barge's mooring snapped. It drifted, blocking torch sight for a heartbeat. And in that heartbeat Robb's men dived under. Water closed overhead, shock cold. He kicked, lungs locking around stale breath. Shapes churned. Weed, broken beams, a Karstark's hand reaching. They surfaced inside the docks, clinging to barnacled pylons. Up the pylons, past mooring rings and slime onto narrow boards. Half the night watch milled around the breach, voices high with panic. Robb's sodden strike party ghosted through stacked barrels until the urchin channels of Flea Bottom opened like welcoming knives. Stark men scattered by pairs, tasked to ignite panic. A bakery torch knocked over here, a merchant wagon overturned there, always away from the palace to drag the watch thin. Robb and Darren Mormont slunk toward the street of steel. Every smithy door glowed. In the clangor of hammers, none heeded 2 dripping shadows. They passed under a sign showing a hanged man, Tobo Mott's forge, and angled toward the Septa house where Littlefinger's informers once nested. Robb prayed the sport of courtiers worked still. He needed whispers to grow into shouts. Near the hook he found them, drunk freeriders wearing half-lions on their cloaks. They swaggered from a wine sink, boasting of the Queen's plan to trade the Wolf Lord's head for Riverrun's gold. Robb pressed back against plaster, blood roaring in his ears. He did not strike. Better their words carry. The city trembled. By dawn, plumes of smoke rose where bread ovens burned unchecked, and rumors spread faster than sparks. The north had breached the river. Dire wolves ran in the alleys. King Robert's ghost strode the keep demanding wine and vengeance alike. On the ridge outside, Great John Umber heard distant bells toll and flashed a grin. Sounds like breakfast. Caitlyn's knuckles whitened on her mare's reins. She awaited the signal. 3 arrow flares arcing blood red over the bay. Proof the mud gate's collapse gave room for assault boats. But the horizon remained empty. Inside King's Landing, Robb fought air made of sweat and terror. He doubled back along a scribe's lane, only to meet a clutch of gold cloaks dragging sacks of caltrops. A Karstark arrow whispered from a rooftop, felling the lead. Chaos. Robb seized the moment, cutting left through a tanner's yard, hide stink gagging him. He emerged near Cobbler's Square as a squad of Lannister spearmen jogged past, eyes darting. Smoke from bakery fires smeared the sky orange. "Too fast," he muttered, ducking behind a barrow. The city was reacting quicker than planned. Bolton's timeline expected 4 hours of confusion. They'd had 2. Somebody inside moved troops with unnerving speed. Footsteps. A whisper. Then Darren Mormont's gruff rasp. "The gatehouse guard holds firm. Can't raise the portcullis, though counterweights jammed by our beams. They'll free 'em by noon. Then noon is too late." Robb's mind whirled. If the portcullis rose, the breach became worthless. The assault boats would skewer themselves on spikes. They needed Sabotage deeper in. Darren jerked his chin toward hilltop towers. Red Keep's water tunnels feed hydraulics. Bust those, wait stays jammed. Where? The Pisswater Bend culverts. South Spire. Robb exhaled. That far. A mile of enemy streets, each corner crawling with restless guards. They moved. Alleys twisted like entrails. Robb kept to shadows, the dire wolf stitched on his doublet hidden beneath soot. Twice they crouched as crossbowmen hurried past. Once they flattened against a brothel wall when a Lannister sergeant rallied footmen from within. A girl in silks leaned from a second-floor window, giggling at the spectacle, then shrank back when steel caught moonlight. No heroes sung here, only knives and nerve. When they reached the narrow aqueduct arching to Pisswater Bend, morning light had seeped through smoke until the world looked cast in brass. The culvert gate yawned, a maw of moss-slick brick barred by rusted grill. Robb shed cloak and boots, slid into rank water chest-high, and probed for the Riverrun walkway he remembered from old Nan's tales of Maegor's secret passages. Moss gave under his palm, revealing a lever disguised as drainage rod. One pull, the great ground open. Within, darkness swallowed sound. Torchlight would betray them. They groped along cold walls, counting steps. Somewhere above, yawning gears turned the twin portcullis chains. They found the first wheel room by smell, stale grease, hot iron. The copper tang of blood where some unlucky urchin had lost fingers. A lone engineer nodded off beside a brazier. Darren Mormont broke his neck before he woke. Robb wedged daggers into cogs, poured river tar on axles, and hammered pins home with the silent thud of wrapped hilts. A lever slammed forward. Counterweights clanged once, juddered, then came to rest forever locked. The mud gate would remain half-drowned until carpenters tore the entire assembly apart. Footsteps clattered down the tunnel, voices sharp. They slipped behind machinery as two gold cloaks burst in, swords drawn. One smelled the tar, the other lifted the engineer's limp arm, and Darren surged from shadow, driving a knife into the speaker's throat. Robb sprang on the second, blade sliding beneath the chin. The men fell in silence broken only by rat scrabble. "We go," Robb breathed. Every heartbeat spent here risked discovery. They retraced their route, hauled themselves onto the bank, and sprinted northward through twisting gutters. By the time they reached Flea Bottom's boundary, horns howled furious along the riverfront. Bolton's flare arrows streaked the sky scarlet. Siege gongs pounded from the northern ridge. Through alley gaps Robb glimpsed the great purple stela of Tully snapping in the wind and, further back, the dire wolf standard rising like storm cloud. He seized a stable boy scattering grain to the gutters. "Find Grey Wind," Robb growled. "Grey wolf big as a pony. Walk him to the mud gate. He will smell me and lead me out." The boy squeaked assent, wide-eyed at the ash-splattered face and northern growl. Coins jangled into his palm. Manderley's dwarfed banners advanced first across the shallows, forming a living bridge of shields. Spears bristled behind as Karstark pikemen pushed half-ruined barges against the breach, their decks crawling with archer militia. Above them, Lannister bolts rained. Shields lifted. One barge caught fire, yet the tide of Grey advanced. Great John himself strode knee-deep, roaring oaths. A mason's hammer swung in his fist like a child's toy, smashing helm after helm. Arrows stuck in his bare hide but never slowed the bellow in his throat. For the north, Catelyn remained atop the ridge, knuckles white on reins, scanning for any sign of her son. She saw a shape dart along inner battlements. Could that be Robb? Or only a gold cloak retreating? Smoke blurred vision. The din of battle drowned all guesswork. Inside the city, Robb climbed rooftop to rooftop, guided by the thunder of Umber war cries. He crested a slanted thatch and saw the breach. Stark men poured through like meltwater freed. Grey Wind materialized from the chaos, hackles high, muzzle painted with enemy blood. The wolf scented Robb across 50 yards and bounded, leaping crates, scattering panicked dockworkers. When fur slammed into Robb's chest, relief near felled him more surely than any spear. "Good boy," Robb whispered, burying hands in that shaggy neck. Now home. Clinging to the wolf's tail, he slipped among friendlies surging toward Fishmonger Square where the Mud Gate Avenue widened. A Lannister shield wall blocked the far end, crimson cloaks bright as new wounds. Trumpets shrieked. The wall advanced, shields interlocked, poleaxes bristling. Bolton's men darted aside, creating a pocket. Into that pocket lunged Grey Wind, jaws snapping shield rims, dragging soldiers from formation. Gaps widened. Great John followed with two-handed hammer, crumpling steel like bread loaf, howling maniac mirth. The Lannister wall buckled, snapped. When the rout broke, Robb saw the standard of the hand. The king's falcon quill, trampled beneath umber boots. Victorious roars filled the square, but Robb lifted sword high. "Forward!" he shouted. "To the September of Baelor." Father would be held near the Sept for public spectacle. Every step now might splice another chain. Riverrun knights picked up the cry. They drove up Hook Way, cutting through yards still sleeping behind barred shutters. Sentries deserted posterns when gray wind appeared first, tail thrashing like banner in gale. Children peered from door cracks. Small folk pressed to walls whispering the Wolf King, the Wolf King. The Sept spires rose ahead, white marble smeared with soot. Gold cloaks mustered at the plaza, but their lines were thin, pulled toward the docks and the river ramparts. Robb's column hit them like winter's first blizzard. Swords rang on plate. A Septon screamed as a warhorse reared. Flower sellers fled beneath overturned stalls. Caitlin arrived, breathless, with fresh companies of tall-heart spears. She found the square half won. 6 Kingsguard locked in circle around the Sept door, white cloaks fluttering, long swords wheeling like moonlight. Ser Boros blew his high helm trumpet, calling reinforcements that would never come. Robb rode at him head-on. Their blades met with a clang that echoed off stone saints. Gray wind circled, snapping at gold cloak legs, sowing dread. One Kingsguard lunged at the direwolf. Too slow. Teeth sank into mail, pulled him down. Another found Karstark steel between visor slits. 2 more backed into the Sept's shadow, blocking the door. "Yield!" Robb roared, fresh sweat burning ash from his brow. "Traitor!" Ser Boros answered, spittle flying. "By king's decree, your king is a boy playing at crowns. Better a boy than a wolf cub." They clashed again. Boros's reach longer, his strokes heavy. Robb slid under one, shoulder driving, pommel to visor. The white cloak reeled. Robb's offhand dagger punched through gorget leather, slipping between plates. Hot blood sprayed. Boros fell grasping the wound, cries gargling. Robb pressed to the door as his men finished the rest. Caitlin joined him, cheeks streaked with grime. "They'll have him in Maegor's dungeons now," she warned. "Or the cells beneath." "No," Robb said, breath ragged. "Cersei wants display. He's within." He slammed pommel upon the doors. They gave after the third strike. Inside, torchlight flickered off pillars carved with the 7. The nave was empty but for a scattering of candle stubs and pools of melted wax. Footsteps echoed. They advanced toward the dais. A figure stepped from behind a column, small, sardonic, eyes bright beneath a broad forehead. Tyrion Lannister. He wore dusty mail and carried no weapon raised. "Well," the imp said, voice wry, "the guest has arrived early. I was sent to usher you to court, yet court appears to have come to you." Robb leveled sword but did not strike. "Where is my father?"
"To your side."
"Your father, Lord Stark the Elder, is presently in a black cell, shackles intact, though I must admit the accommodations leave something to be desired. Lead me, and be cut down by every lion still breathing betwixt here and the keep? I think not. However," Tyrion lifted a scroll stamped with the hand's seal, though it had been broken. "I possess an order of release, signed by Lord Varys, who lacks legal authority but enjoys tremendous influence over keys, countersigned by Grand Maester Pycelle, who enjoys calligraphy. Alas, the order requires the Queen's countersign above all." "Then this is mockery," Robb advanced. "Mockery would be arriving with a jug of Dornish red and a lute. This is negotiation. Your men overwhelm the mud gate. Mine hold the red keep. We stand at impasse. An hour, a day, a fortnight, until someone starves, or the wildfire below ignites and none of us eat again." Robb's fury pounded. "You treat with a son whose father wears chains because of your sister's lies. And you speak to a brother whose nephew's crown wobbles on a neck not yet firm enough for such weight. Tyrion's gaze flicked toward Catelyn. Lady Stark, you of all know I harbor no love for Cersei's intrigues. I propose an exchange. Your father and daughters for safe withdrawal of your host to Riverrun territory, hostages taken for good conduct. My father's armies likewise withdraw to Harrenhal. Let the lords of the realm judge justice without swords to their backs. Catelyn's lips parted, surprise and wariness mingling. Why would you weaken your sister thus? Because, Tyrion breathed, step closer. The game has grown too bloody for dwarfs and girls. Winter comes and dragons, so the eastward winds whisper. We should settle our little quarrels. He shrugged. Besides, your son fights with admirable ferocity. I would rather drink with him than bury him. On this point, my good man, I trust we agree. Robb's pulse hammered. Every instinct screamed refuse. Push onward. Seize father by force. Yet Grey Wind's low growl reminded him force cost blood freely. Perhaps his sister's before the day ended. He lowered sword tip a fraction. An exchange only earns trust if sealed in bone, he said. You will come with me as surety. We walk to Maegor's together. We leave with my father. If any man looses a bolt at us, you die first. Words to warm my heart, Tyrion muttered. He spread hands. Lead on, Lord Wolf. Outside, the plaza roared with renewed clashes. Arrows still whined from towers. Wildfire casks had not yet been set alight by grace of the Seven, or perhaps because the Alchemists' Guild feared burning their own spires. Robb strode under umbrella of shields, Catelyn at one side, Tyrion at the other, Grey Wind prowling ahead. At sight of the Lannister, gold cloak lines stayed arrows, unsure who commanded whom. They passed through the King's Gate, along serpentine courts charred from Robert's siege years before. Twice they stumbled upon pockets of resistance. Sworn brothers of the Red keep determined to hold corridors. In both cases Tyrion barked orders laced with his father's name. Men lowered blades, letting the strange procession pass. At the base of Maegor's holdfast, the imp turned. Below here, 20 good guards remain. You may slaughter them, but remember Wildfire. Robb's answer was a nod. He motioned Tallheart spearmen forward. They bound Tyrion's hands, lightly as a courtesy, and marched into the black belly of the keep. Torch smoke snarled the stairwell. At the first landing, a quartet of guards barred the way. Tallheart Steel answered. Grey Wind launched, toppling two. The rest fled, clanging down deeper steps. Finally, the black cells, stone corridors so narrow shoulders scraped. Keys clanked from a hook. Robb seized them, heart hammering louder than the arrhythmic drip of unseen water. Door after door he opened, faces of petty thieves and seditious singers blinking at torches. Then a final iron portal, heavier than sense, etched with rust whorls like weirwood tears. The key turned, jammed, turned again. Hinge screeched. The cell beyond was pitch darkness. Father, Robb whispered, the word cracking. Silence. Torch thrust forward revealed a shape slumped against chains hammered into stone. Gray streaked through matted hair, blood crusted at temple, wrists raw. Yet when the light touched his lids, one gray eye opened, steady, impossible. Robb? The voice rasped, meant for soft hearths, not bottomless holes. Robb fell to knees. I am here, your son, your host. Keys fumbled, chains slithered free. Eddard Stark sagged forward. Catelyn caught him, tears sluicing grime from her cheeks. Ned's fingers brushed Robb's cheek, trembling. You've grown. Not enough. He swallowed a sob. Hold fast. We leave this place. But the corridors above thundered now, enemy boots redoubling. A shout echoed. Hold fast sealed. They breach below. Tyrion paled. No time for halls, the dwarf hissed. There is a sallieway from Maegor's foundations. Varys's little birds use it to whisk secrets under the hill. I can guide you if we all prefer breathing. Robb met his mother's gaze. She nodded. Hope demanded risk. With Ned half-supported between them, they plunged into a warren of spider holes, Tyrion's memory their torch. Behind, Gray wind snarled at encroaching clangor. Ahead the dwarf muttered directions like incantations. Left under the Weeper's pipe, right at the broken gargoyle, down the weeping stairs. At last they emerged onto a forgotten garden behind the rookery, ivy-choked, starlight pooling silver. Low wall, black water of the moat beyond, umber banners faint over ramparts. Ned pulled breath of fresh air that rattled through bruised ribs. He sagged but smiled through cracked lips. "Smells of pine," he murmured. Horns blared from the hill, stark horns this time, triumphant, merging with the rumble of thousands chanting one name. Stark, Stark, Stark. The city of lions trembled under a gale of wolves. Yet dawn's gold had not kissed the keep's highest tower before fresh dread flew its wings. From the western horizon, on roads dust-clouded, a second army approached. Banners red and gold, a lion rampant, column after column shimmering beneath Tywin Lannister's unblinking gaze. Robb clasped his father's hand, feeling the faint pulse there. Around the men knelt, wept, cheered, but his eyes fixed upon that far smudge of renewed war. The young wolf had won a gate and freed his sire, yet winter still stalked the realm, and its fiercest snows were lions' manes blown wild. He rose, taller than before, and the dawn finally broke over King's Landing drenched in the howl of wolves preparing anew. Robb Stark stood beneath the shattered griffin gargoyle that crowned the rookery garden wall and watched the winking sunrise wash gold across the distant columns of dust. Each column was a standard. Tyrion had named them in a low, even cadence. The Red Ox of Crakehall, the Myrish-dyed Serpent of Brax, the Cadet Lions of Lydon and Lefford, and, brightest of all, the Roaring Lion of Casterly Rock. Some banners gleamed crimson, some faded to rust, but every one told the same tale. Lord Tywin Lannister had come in person, and the young wolf's victory had been bought on credit. Gray wind growled at the horizon. The sound trickled through the garden like a herald's trumpet, sending Maester's ravens flapping from their perches. Eddard Stark, barely able to balance his weight, laid a hand upon his son's shoulder. "Send me north," he rasped. "It is me he hunts. Let him chase a ghost on the King's Road while you hold the city." "I will not make you quarry," Robb whispered back. "You are Winterfell's heart. The heart remains within the chest." Ned's tired laugh scraped like leather on stone. "Then we fortify the ribs and pray the arrows glance." A shudder clapped. The dwarf emerged, rubbing wrists still red from tall heart rope. "Tidings," Tyrion announced. "Unpleasant, though not entirely unforeseen. Your men at the mud gate are stalled. Burning pitch from the towers, scorpions on the walls. If Lord Tywin pins them against the river, our hard-won breach becomes a coffin." Robb considered the map he had sketched upon a stripped garden slate. A hasty smear of chalk towers, 3 narrow causeways, the Blackwater's looping arm. He tapped the slanted scrawl labeled Dragonpit. "We fall back here," he said. "High ground, stone walls, the bay at our rear. If Tywin means to strangle us, let him try with his back to the sea." Catelyn frowned. "That pit is a tomb of ruin, Robb. No wells, no grain. Stone is stone, and we need walls more than bread, walls bought with dragonfire once. Gray wind can hunt. Manderly ships can ferry sacks upriver. We can hold a fortnight." Tyrion snorted softly. "Tywin commands 30,000, with siege trains lumbering an hour behind. A fortnight and he will have ox teams dragging scorpions tall as towers. Then he bleeds for each inch," Robb answered, voice as flint. "Better his oxen break in mud than our men in alleys." The plan settled like dusk. Messengers dashed to the riverfront, horns blew the call to withdraw. 3 long, 1 short, 3 quick. Tallheart and Karstark levies peeled from the half-held gate and threaded south through winding streets. Banners furled to pass beneath burning balconies. Behind them, vengeful gold cloaks pressed, but Bolton's rear guard slipped shadow to shadow, tossing caltrops beneath boot heels, toppling cheese carts to clog crossings, turning each alley into a throat that swallowed pursuit whole. By midday, the Stark host occupied the broken shell of the Dragonpit. Roofless and circular, its blackened vaults gaped beneath a forest of fallen ribs where dragons had once rattled chains. The western arches soared intact enough to mount scorpions. The eastern buttresses leaned but held. Robb's engineers dragged beams ripped from shattered manses, lashed them into firing platforms, and braced them with rubble. Manderley crossbowmen hauled heavy cranesquin racks up cracked staircases. Umber pikemen stacked shields along breach rents. Edmure Tully directed a train of riverboats to beach below Rhaenys' hill, ferrying barley sacks, kegs of salt pork, and casks of White Harbor ale. Great John commandeered 2 half-built galleys rotting on the mudflats and spiked their masts into the outer ramparts as makeshift watchtowers. Soon gray banners fluttered from the silhouettes of dead dragons and skeletal ships alike. Creatures of fire and water yoked into fortress form. Robb rode the perimeter thrice, counting every bowslit and murder hole. At dusk he halted before a mason's scaffold, where Meage Mormont's second daughter Lyra pounded iron spikes into ancient stone. "You work with fury," Robb noted. Lyra wiped sweat with a sooty arm. "Lions murdered my uncle at Sow's Horn. Fury is the tool at hand. Keep it sharp," he said, and tossed her his waterskin. Night settled upon King's Landing as a cloak of embers. The fires Robb's raiders had set now burned themselves to ash, leaving only pillars of smoking ruin and a chorus of mourning dogs. Yet beyond the city walls, fresh torches bloomed, a ring of daylight in miniature, moving with the methodical precision of a craftsman's compass. Tywin Lannister's camp. Each torchline marked a regiment. Each regiment traced an arc. The arcs converged as if hemming the city within a fiery sigil. Robb watched from the jagged window of a collapsed clerestory. Bolton joined him, face half-lit in orange glow. "Lord Tywin builds a necklace," Bolton murmured. "He thinks us a gemstone. Gemstones crack under hammer." Robb's smile surfaced ghostly. "Diamonds do not." Bolton's eyes flickered. "Yet even diamonds shatter at the right angle." Down in the pit, Catelyn laid her father upon a pallet of straw brought from a gutted stable. Maester Luwin fetched boiled willow bark and wrapped Ned's wrists with linen soaked in honey. The old wolf slept fitful, whispering children's names. Sansa, Arya, Bran. Catelyn sat vigil until the unfamiliar hush unnerved her. King's Landing, city of shrieks, now muffled by dread. She left Ned's side and climbed the narrow stair that corkscrewed to the parapet. There she found Tyrion standing on a blasted cornice, cup of wine cradled between palms. "I recall the dragons roosting high above this very spot," he mused. "Balerion, Vagor, Mare Axes, all magnificence and terror. Now their ghosts nest in cracked stone." "Ghosts cannot kill," Catelyn said. "Their memory can. Men still fear what Dragonfire wrought, and fear is a sharper lance than any steel." From the darkness below, gray forms prowled, Bolton's silent footpads, loosing themselves beyond the walls in pairs. They carried no banners, only curved skinning knives sheathed in wool to muffle clink. Catelyn followed his gaze. "Roose hunts locusts while lions gather." "He hunts information, my lady," Tyrion corrected gently, "which is exactly what your son needs most before dawn." Dawn came blood-red behind low clouds. Robb had not slept. He stood over a rough-hewn trestle in the Dragonpit's broken choir, poring over a city map inked by Davos Seaworth in Robert's War. Gray wind stared at the outer arch, ears flicking every heartbeat. Bolton arrived first, cloak dripping with dew, face expressionless. He laid 3 strips of crimson cloth atop the map. "Tokens taken from Lion scouts on the Rose Road," he reported. 50 dead. No survivors. Too near. Closer each hour. Lord Tywin's outriders test our seams." Robb set a wooden wolf upon the southernmost approach. "Where does he mean to strike?" A new voice answered. "Here," said Ser Brynden Tully, striding from the stair with braids still damp from river spray. He wore full mail, helm plume drooping. Behind him limped Corran Halfhand, face bandaged where a crossbow quarrel had scored his cheek. The Night's Watch Ranger had ridden south with Brynden after tracking Lannister banners through the western marches. "The lions mass beyond the Mud Gate ruins," Brynden said. "They'll faint at the King's Gate to fix you, then storm those docks at Flitteed." If the tide lifts their transports, they can pour men straight into the pit. Robb exhaled. Then we meet them on the river. He summoned Ser Wyman Manderly, Lord of White Harbor and Admiral of Fat Bellies. Manderly arrived wheezing, beard dripping gravy. Your ships will screen the mouth, Robb ordered. Sink what you cannot capture. Scour the banks with fire arrows. Manderly's cheeks quivered. It shall be as you say, though the tide's a devil at dawn. Devils burn like any other. Grey Wind barked once, the warning. A horn blared from the high mast tower Greatjon had planted. Moments later, a Karstark outrider burst into the choir, leather flapping. Lion host forms in 3 divisions, my lord. Center rides the Rose Road. Left wing curves north by the Hook. Right skirts the Blackwater. Robb dug knuckles into the wood. Signal Manderly to weigh anchor. All river bridges to be raised. Bolton, have your flayers line the Hook approaches. Edmure, hold the King's Gate with your river knights till you see the torch bloom. Edmure blinked. What torch? The one I light from Tywin's siege tower, Robb said, voice quiet as steel. Tywin Lannister, Warden of the West, studied the smoking skyline of the capital from a knoll abloom with wind-blown thistle. His armor shone dull bronze. His horse, a coal-dark destrier, stamped impatiently on flint. Beneath him, brigades spread like war fans, each rib a cohort of spearmen, each tip a cavalry banner. Ser Kevin reined to his side. Our vanguard is ready. Ser Flemont will strike the dock's first light, as ordered. Tywin's pale green gaze glinted. Robb Stark is young, but no fool. He will contest the mud gate again. See that Flemont's men bear shields whetted to quench pitch. And the right wing? The city has holes enough for rats. We plug one, the rats scurry anew. Our right merely herds them toward my center. Tywin twisted the signet on his finger, feeling the lion's head bite. End this quick. Set crown firm. Send Goldcloaks north. The realm bleeds spare coin no more. Efficiency, always. He raised a gauntlet. Trumpets blared. The lion began to stalk. The first crash of iron met stone as dawn broke fully. Flemont Brax's column slammed against the half-collapsed dock gate, ladders rising like a forest. Manderly archers loosed from rooftops. Corals hammered shields. The sea wind carried screams and briny spray together. Pitch poured from murder holes onto ascending lions, bursting into oily flame as flint pots shattered below. But Brax's men kept climbing, feet sloughing skin on smoking rungs, hands blistering, for their lord rode behind with a flanged mace that felled any man who turned. Along the river, Swift's galleys attempted to nose upriver under square sails of Lannister crimson. White Harbor longships, oars flashing silver, intercepted. The first collision cracked hulls. Grapnels flew. Boarders vaulted railings amid geysers of splinters. Manderly's housetail mermaid shrieked on shield fronts where iron battered iron. Men tumbled into churning green, thrashing under the weight of mail. Arrows stitched the water around them like tailors sewing shut a shroud. Robb surveyed from a vantage atop the Dragonpit's tallest arch. Greatjon clambered up behind, breath gusting. Lions press us hell-bent, the Umber growled. Say the word and I'll ride the bastards down. Not yet, Robb answered. Let them taste stone first. A messenger flagged from the East Bastion. 3 rapid waves. Tywin's right wing had reached the Hook. Bolton's foot would harry them in alleys, but only for a spell. Farther north, horns from Edmure's lines spoke of cavalry probe at the King's Gate. The lion stretched claws on every side at once. Robb drew a breath of smoke-tainted air. Greatjon, gather the bear banners. We ride for the docks. Greatjon grinned, exposing broken teeth. I've waited since Sau's horn. They thundered down broken staircases, armor sparking stone. Robb paused at Ned's pallet long enough to clasp his father's hand. A fever flush had returned, but the old man's eyes opened at the touch. Hold fast, father. At dusk we drink northern mead. Ned's fingers tightened, then slipped as sleep reclaimed him. Robb swung into saddle and spurred through broken archways. Gray wind racing ahead, howling challenge. They emerged onto Fishmonger's Square, where battle had resumed from dawn's first groan. Brax's rams pounded at rebuilt gates. Smoke coiled from burning siege ladders. Charred corpses littered quay pilings. Grachan's charge hit the Lannister flank with the fury of a storm tide. Northern axes chewed spear shafts. Grim women of Bear Island fought like wolverines, knives flashing under shields. Robb led the second wave straight for the largest siege tower, a wagon monstrosity crawling on oxen. Tywin's engineers had sheathed it in wetted hides. They had not expected Umber lightning. Robb vaulted from saddle, scramble-climbed tarred planks, jammed a torch into the reeking cowhide roof. Flames sputtered, then roared as sap-seeped pine caught beneath. He plunged through smoke to the other side, landing amid startled lion archers. Grey wind followed, jaws finding throats. Below, Great John bellowed for javelins. Men hurled firepots that burst like ripe melons over hides. The tower became a pillar of crackling orange, oxen lowing madly as they dragged their blazing burden back. Too late. The supports gave. The structure toppled sideways and smashed across the quay, flattening a rank of Lannister spearmen and carving a path through their assault. Where the tower fell, a plume of sparks soared high, visible across city and field alike. The young wolf's torch. Edmure saw it from the King's Gate parapet and loosed his reserve. 100 Riverrun lancers surging through the postern, around Aegon's Hill, to crash into Tywin's probing cavalry. Cut off and isolated, the Lion's right wing probe reeled, sheared apart by volleys from Blackwood longbows. Across the hook, Bolton's flares emerged from cellars and roof gaps, falling upon the Lion infantry pressing through the cramped slums. Curved knives flashed. Bodies vanished into darkness. Panic ate discipline. The Lion left wing slowed, bogged in its own blood. Tywin watched from his command ridge, expression carved in brass. Horn signals fluttered. His assaults had stalled. The northern boy struck fastest where fire burned hottest. But Tywin had not reigned warden so long without second blades. Behind the main lines, a regiment of heavy horse, Clegane men and Lefford, detached and wheeled north, banners hidden beneath burlap. They skirted charred farmland, aimed at a shallow rise behind the Dragonpit's rear wall. If they fractured the pit's supply tail, Robb's victory would starve before sunrise. Tywin sent a Ravenfeather-black arrow skyward, silent order to charge. Catelyn Stark found herself amid wounded rows beside the pit's rear rise. Maester Luwin's assistants lay Ned upon a travois. Men fetched water from cracked cisterns. Wounded groaned where healers stitched flesh by torchlight. She heard hoofbeats before she saw them, the thunder of armored chargers bearing down from the northwest like a wave of iron. "Spears!" she cried, voice raw. "Hedge the rise! All able hands to arms!" A few dozen tall-heart spearmen scrambled. Squires flung helms at half-naked men rousing from sleep. Cooks grabbed carving knives. Too few. Catelyn's gaze landed on a tattered wagon filled with barrels of fish oil bound for lamps. She seized a torch from a brazier, eyes blazing. "Roll them down the slope," she ordered. "Light them when they crest." The first barrels toppled, bouncing upon stony soil. She thrust torch to fuse cloth. Flames licked, then roared. The barrels howled down like comets. The Lefford vanguard had no time to scatter. Exploding oil drenched horses and men alike, turning their charge into a shrieking avalanche of fire. But more squadrons pressed from behind, leaping corpses. Spears braced. The lines met. First contact smashed bone and wood. Second contact broke them. Catelyn snatched a fallen spear, placed herself in the ragged hedge. A lion knight swung a mace at her head. She ducked, stabbed upward, felt point bite under gorget ring. Blood spurted. She stepped aside as the knight toppled. Wind whistled. Another rider soared high, until an axe buried in his ribs, Meege Mormont striding to her lady's flank with a roar. "For the she-wolf!" Meege cried. Tall heart men echoed, finding fury where hope frayed. Ned awoke to chaos. The travois jostled as healers abandoned him for spears. He rolled free, teeth gritting against fever fire, seized a poleaxe from a dead guard. When a left-oared horseman bore down, Ned stepped into range, swung the haft like a scythe at the stallion's knees. The beast folded. Rider flew. Ned reversed grip, drove spike into visor. Pain seared his wrists, but battle carried him forward. One more wolf in the desperate ring. The rear rampart shuddered but held. Clegane's men, seeing the hill blaze, veered to flank the pit eastern wall, only to find Blackfish Brynden barring a breach with half-moon shield wall of Mal Lister veterans. Arrows rained from Brax's own captured scorpions, now turned inward by Manderley crews. The flanking maneuver unraveled under crossfire. On the docks, Robb fought atop the rubble heap that had been the siege tower. Smoke choked lungs, sparks danced on cloak. Gray wind tore through fleeing archers. Grachan's laugh cracked skyward as he shattered a Brax banner pole across his knee and hurled the fragments into the river. A horn sounded from the east. Edmure's cavalry sweeping round, chasing Tywin's withdrawn probe. Robb spied the banners. Tully Trout leaping silver in dawn sun, and felt momentum pivot like a sword in his palm. "Signal retreat into the pit," he commanded. "Our strike is done. Let the walls finish the rest." Great John blew 3 short blasts on a war horn fashioned from mammoth tusk. Northern cavalry disengaged, riding hard for the pit gates now fully theirs. Lion forces scrambled after, but Umber rearguards toppled burning carts and pulled down fishing nets weighted with lead to snare charging horses. By the time Flemont Brax rallied a pursuit, Stark riders had vanished into the Dragonpit's smoky maw, gates slamming behind. Tywin saw the smoke column rise where his tower burned, measured the scattering of his right wing, felt his center grind to a halt amid ferric stench, and called halt by crimson banner. He signaled for siege lines to encircle, not assault. A strangler's wire tightened by increments. Robb stepped onto the parapet beside Caitlin as the last Lefford charge broke against Meage's battered circle. His cloak smelled of ash. Blood speckled his cheek. "They have weight yet to throw," he muttered. "And we have hearts yet to break," Caitlin answered, pressing a wet cloth to a bruise blooming above his brow. Bolton arrived, eyes glittering with secret mathematics. "In 3 days our grain casks empty. In 7, fever will kiss every wound. Lord Tywin calculates time as coin, my lords." Robb nodded. "Then we break his abacus." He convened council beneath the fractured dome where dragon bones hung like chandelier ribs. Around a makeshift table, an overturned wagon door, they gathered. Great John bandaged but unbowed, Brynden dusty and hard-eyed, Bolton silent as dusk, Wyman Manderley still panting, Meage Mormont's cheeks streaked with soot, Edmure with a sling across one shoulder. Tyrion observed from a barrel, legs dangling. Robb spoke. "We stand behind stone, but stone may crack. Tywin expects patience to starve us. We answer with a dagger to the heart." He laid out the plan. At moonrise, Bolton's foot would slip through the King's Landing postern still held by Karstark scouts and ghosts. They would glide along the base of Visenya's hill, seeking Tywin's siege kitchens and powder wagons rumored by scouts to mass near the Kingsroad Fork. A single spark could torch supplies meant for a fortnight. While Tywin's rear flamed, the Blackfish would lead a sortie from the pit's south gate, striking his command ridge. Robb himself would ride behind, reserved to exploit breach or protect withdrawal. Great John slammed fist on plank. "Aye!" Set the old lion's tail ablaze. Bolton's smile was thin as spider silk. "You trust my knives behind enemy tents, my lord? I trust your love of victory, or failing that, your love of fear in other men's eyes." Tyrion raised an eyebrow. "Beware. Lions may yet hold wildfire casks in their baggage. Then we give them air to spread their inferno," Brynden said dryly. All agreed. None smiled. Late afternoon brought a lull, broken only by distant hammering as lion engineers raised mantlets and dug lines. Robb patrolled among wounded, sharing crusts of black bread, listening to fears. He knelt with a Karstark boy whose eyes wept pus, spoke soft until the lad slept. He sat with a manderly archer missing 3 fingers and promised a better bow with easier pull. He stroked Grey Wind's back where arrow grazes scored fur, whispering hushes he half believed. At twilight's edge, he joined Maester Luwin by his father's pallet. Ned's fever had cooled, though pain lingered like frost. Robb relayed the plan. Ned's gray eyes sharpened. "Let me ride the sortie," he pleaded, voice ragged but firm. "I may be half whole, yet the men will rally to their lord." Robb clasped his father's hand. "You gave river and stone to bring me here, father. Now give me trust." Ned's gaze softened. "So like your mother when you fight me with love." He squeezed. "Win swift, then fly north. The true war looms, I fear, beyond all southern crowns." Robb thought of White Walker's old and spoke of walls of ice and night that had no songs, and nodded. Moonrise swam behind a veil of thin cloud, painting Tywin's camp in ghost light. The lion army sprawled orderly. Concentric ditches, picket rows, pennants limp in still air. Beyond, siege engines lurked, silhouettes like slumbering giants. But the kitchens, 3 long rows of braziers, grain wagons, and ale tuns, lay southwest of the main tent cluster, guarded by cooks with cleavers and a handful of Sellsword veterans. Roose Bolton emerged from the hook shadows with 200 men clad in soot-blacked leather. They ghosted between picket lanterns, slitting throats of sentries, easing bodies to ground. At the supply yard, Bolton signaled. Jars of lamp oil were hoisted, stoppers pulled, contents sloshed across stacks of barley sacks. Another squad sliced mule harnesses, loosed horses, with torches tied to tails, to stampede among tents. When the first fire kindled, it spread in hungry sheets, licking dry canvas and pitch-rubbed wagon wheels. South gate of the Dragonpit swung wide. Bryndon's veterans drove forth like an iron spear. Their target, the ridge where Tywin's crimson pavilion rose, cresting a line of command tents. 50 mailed riders led, shields painted a black trout. Behind came foot knights and pikemen bearing wolf and trout entwined. Robb watched from the rampart until Bolton's fires leapt bright orange beyond the siege lines. Only then did he mount his smoke-streaked destrier and lead Greyjohn's reserve through the same gate, trailing Brynden by a sword's length of time. Tywin Lannister was conferring with Maester Alfred by lanternlight when thunder rolled from the south. Flame glare illuminated his pavilion walls. He stepped out to behold supply wagons ablaze, horses screaming, tents falling like burning scrolls. Horns blared, commanders scrambled. Into this chaos slammed the Blackfish spear. Bryndon's riders burst through the first ring of guards. A left-oared captain lunged, only to find Bryndon's lance skewering his chest. Music of steel rang as trout and lion danced under flames. Tywin's red cloaks rallied, forming a hedge around their lord. Arrows hissed. A Mallister banner carrier toppled. Brynden dismounted into the press, sword flashing silver. He carved a path toward the crimson pavilion, but sheer weight of numbers swarmed. Then Greyjohn's howl pierced the din, and Robb's fresh column crashed into Tywin's flank. Grey Wind leapt a burning ditch, landed upon a Rain sergeant, tore out throat and moved on before blood hit grass. The smell of smoke and fear thickened. Robb pressed forward, seeking the lion helm trimmed in red silk he knew must belong to Tywin. Crossbow bolts zipped. One grazed his pauldron, another thudded into shield. He swung at a Clegane man, cleaving helm, sidestepped a pike thrust, drove knee into the belly of an archer. Yet the crimson pavilion remained distant, defenders layering like scales. Bolton arrived from the rear, knives dripping. He whispered something in Robb's ear, words lost in uproar, but Robb caught powder wagons, chain reaction. Moments later, a thunderclap shattered night. Wildfire casks stored near the center ignited. Green flame mushroomed, searing the heavens, painting every face a corpse's hue. Men screamed blinded as unholy fire flowed like liquid emerald, devouring tents and flesh alike. Tywin's voice cut through. "Back! Clear the green!" He spurred mount, cloak aflame at edge, yet calm radiated from his motion, as though chaos were a known steed. His escort shielded him with overlapping pavises, retreating stepwise. Robb saw the opening, a narrow lane carved by exploding casks. He urged his destrier, gray wind bounding ahead. But as he closed, a figure stepped into path. Ser Gregor Clegane, the mountain, towering in midnight plate stained with pitch. His great sword glowed ember orange, edges slick with molten tar. The mountain swung. Robb's shield shattered like autumn pine. Shock Jared elbow to shoulder. He reeled, felt blood warm his fingers. Gray wind lunged at the giant's unarmored knee crook. Teeth met chainmail. The mountain kicked, sending the wolf skidding. Robb drew breath, planted feet, raised sword two-handed. The mountain roared and charged. Blade met blade, a scream of metal. Sparks flew. Robb slid aside, slashing at exposed armpit. His edge bit, shallow. Clegane backhanded, pommel cracking Robb's visor ring, stars bursting behind eyes. He fell to one knee. The mountain raised sword for killing stroke, then froze, bellow dying in throat. A slim shape clung to his left flank. Lyra Mormont, axe buried beneath his pauldron. The mountain swung arm, flinging her aside like doll, but the brief halt gave Robb breath. He surged, plunged sword under gorget. Steel grated spine. Clegane gurgled, staggered, then slumped forward with a crash that shook the ridge. Robb hauled Lyra to her feet. She grinned through blood splatter. "Big man, bigger hole?" she quipped before collapsing unconscious into his arms. He looked up. Tywin's red cloak vanished behind a ring of knights retreating toward the Rose Road. The lion was escaping. Robb started after, but horns blared from the Blackwater direction. 3 high, 2 low. The distress cry. His forces at the pit rear were under renewed assault. Decision knifed. Chase the lion, risk his host breaking the pit, or turn back to shield his wounded. Robb clenched teeth, sheathed blade. He hefted Lyra onto Grey Wind's back and ordered Greatjon to cover withdrawal. Brynden signaled, his trout banner guiding battered columns back toward city gates. Flames crackled behind, casting enormous shadows that stalked them like specters. Tywin watched from a saddle atop the next ridge, flanked by Kevin and a dozen knights. His pavilion and kitchens lay in raging ruin. His right and left wings bruised, but his core remained iron. He saw Robb withdraw, noted the limp of his destrier, the exhaustion in his lines, and measured advantage regained. The old lion turned to Kevin. "Tomorrow we advance siege towers at dawn. Signal Lord Crakehall to shore the river flank. Ser Adam to rally orphan banners. We strangle them still." Robb's host staggered through the south gate by moonfall. Inside, Dragonpit wounded-lined corridors where once dragons rattled. Caitlin met him, eyes wide at Lyra's limp form. She helped lift the girl to healers, then drew Robb aside. "Ned fights fever again," she said quietly. "He will not last long without Poppy. We cease these battles soon, else none last long," Robb answered, voice hoarse. In councils there is sometimes a moment when collective fatigue dissolves hierarchy. Midnight found that moment. Greatjon slumped against column base. Brynden chewed leaf to dull pain. Bolton flicked blood from gloves. Manderly sucked ale like mother's milk. Robb paced, searching faces. "We hurt him tonight," he said, "but his jaw still clamps our throat. We must break free, not hold." Edmure coughed. "Riverrun stands. Uncle writes that Tywin stripped the west of defenders. If we could reach the Trident, resupply, join forces with Blackwood and Bracken." Bolton's head lifted. "The neck remains closed by our men by your design. We could vanish north, force Tywin to chase, stretching his tail." "No," Robb said. "I will not lead my wounded on a flight while Ned Stark dies behind." A silence, heavy. Tyrion, who had listened from crate's edge, cleared throat. A perhaps unpalatable suggestion. "Send me." I fixed him. "My brother Jaime commands the van at Riverrun," Tyrion continued. "Free him from those dungeons and you may trade lion for lion. Tywin would grant much for his golden boy. Perhaps safe passage, perhaps truce." Edmure bristled. Trade the Kingslayer for peace? Insult to Riverlanders. Perhaps, Tyrion allowed. Yet insult tastes better than famine. Robb considered. Jaime is far, and this siege closes. Not so far if your fastest riders slip north tonight, cross the Tumblestone, drag his gilded carcass south along river roads kept clear by your own outriders. Tywin will not dare kill Stark wounded if his heir sits a hostage within bowshot. Catelyn's gaze weighed the proposal. She recalled the Kingslayer's sneer, the shove that tumbled Bran from a tower and felt bile rise, but also the memory of her daughters still captive. If trading Jaime freed them, I will ride, she said. Robb startled. Mother, I am no stranger to long roads, and Jaime Lannister may be more pliant before a queenly captive than northern lads with axes. Brynden nodded. I ride with her. Riverrun's walls yet hold. Robb paced 2 turns. The air smelled of burnt flesh and damp straw. Finally he spoke. Very well. You ride at dawn with 50 picked horse. Take the Gold Cloak's own eastern ferry. The bay still ours in morning light. Bring Jaime south, and bring fleet sails from Tully ports if you can. Catelyn clasped his arm. Hold until I return. I will hold, he promised, or die on the walls. Dawn of the 3rd siege day rose copper on gray cloud. Tywin's towers creaked into place along the southern ditch, shields bristling. Brax's men hammered new ladders. Clegane's standards flew half-mast in morning yet steady. Within the pit, Robb inspected walls, stone cracked but strong. Manderly's last bread cask scraped bottom. Water barrels half thanks to roof collection. He addressed his men. Every breath we draw denies the lion victory. Every heartbeat we share echoes from Winterfell to Dorne. Stand one day more, and the realm must answer who truly wears courage. Cheers shuddered rafters though throats were hoarse. On rampart's edge Robb found Ned seated on stool, cloaked in blanket. Father and son watched Tywin's crimson tide assemble. When I was young, Ned murmured, I stood beside Robert's banners on this same hill, afraid yet proud. Today I stand beside my son, neither young nor strong, but prouder than ever a man might be. Robb swallowed. I meant to bring you north again. You did more, you brought honor south where honor was lost. Whatever dawn shows next, remember your truth. A trumpet shrieked. Tywin's towers began their crawl. Battering rams rolled, draped in wet hides. Crossbow curtains advanced. Robb fitted helm, lifted sword. Gray wind howled. From the north came an answering call, horns, distant yet thrilling. Robb's heart leapt. He climbed a siege stair. There, beyond the hook, dust clouds rose not lion red but gray-white and river blue. Banners. The leaping trout, the dire wolf, the thrush of Blackwood, the red stallion of Bracken, even the mailed fist of the sisters. Behind them, javelin glint upon javelin glint. Catelyn's riders had reached Riverrun in a night and day. Tully vassals had answered river swift with oars. Now barges surged down the Blackwater bearing fresh spears, while on land 2,000 Riverland horse thundered to break Tywin's siege tale. Tywin pivoted, green eyes narrowing. His lines had committed to assault. His rear now screamed for shields. The precision of lion array faltered. Robb felt blood surge. To me! He roared from parapet. Open the gates. Grachan's hammer pounded oak. The Dragonpit doors yawed. Stark cavalry poured forth, crashing into Tywin's stalled rams from flank, axes splintering frames. Brynden's new column swept the lion supply ditch. Bolton's flayers sprang from culverts to finish wounded. Above, Manderly archers on captured scorpions lofted black-shafted bolts over Tywin's central tower. They arced and fell upon command tents, sending scribes scuttling. Flame arrows followed, igniting pitch buckets reserved for siege. Tywin fought to restore order, but double pane of fresh river host and Dragonpit sortie spread his lines thin as tin beaten too brittle. When Riverland cavalry smashed his left siege tower to splinters, panic rippled at the edges. A rumor spread, wildfire stores gone unstable, swaying near flame. Fear outran reason. Lannister vanguard, seeing trenches burning behind, hawkers of death before, began to buckle.
Ser Adam Marbran de temptid rally.
A Mallister lance unhorsed him. The lion's maw closed on emptiness. Robb spurred ahead, slashing amid rout. He glimpsed Tywin struggling to wheel through chaos. A guard thrust spear at Robb's mount. Grey wind snapped it, jaws sparking on haft. Robb neared the lion, but again fate interposed. A manderly tumbril of flaming tar crashed between them, forcing horses to rear, and Tywin's escort dragged him clear. Trumpets wailed retreat. Tywin's banners turned west, pulling what ranks they could salvage toward the Rose Road. The siege towers were abandoned, burning husks. Archers threw bows to flee. Engineers doused pitch cauldrons and ran. Stark riders pursued until Robb raised hand. Enough! Let them carry word. Great John cursed but reined in. By sunset, the Blackwater banks were littered with smoldering timbers and lion dead. Riverrun barges unloaded grain amid cheers. Healers poured dream wine. Ned Stark watched from wheelchair, silent tears cutting grime. Catelyn rode to her son, dust-caked, cloak torn but eyes bright. Behind her dragged a chain of gold. Jaime Lannister, bound at wrist, hair matted, green eyes simmering like embers of defeated pyres. Robb met his mother's gaze, nodded. He turned to his weary host. Today you stood against the lion and he could not break you. Tomorrow we ride for Riverrun, for Winterfell, for every hearth that waits. Carry the tale. Wolves guard the realm where kings forget their vows. A roar answered, rolling across shattered docks, echoing through palace ruins, carrying into night where even shattered dragons stirred in graves of stone. An echo promising ice and northern stars to dim the proudest gold. High upon the ridge Tywin Lannister paused, flanked by ragged survivors. He looked back once at the city, now firmly in Stark hands, and his jaw set like a locked gate. Winter had come to King's Landing, wearing a wolf's face. And the Game of Thrones found new board with every pawn sworn to redraw the shape of nations.